12 o'clock on the dot, and so I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Thank you all for joining us today. So I am very pleased to have with us today Professor Rob Heverly, who many of you may already know, and our new Director of Communications and Marketing, Tom Torello. So welcome to both of you. And thanks so much for joining today. So as you know, today's program, and I guess I should say I am Mary Walsh Fitzpatrick, the Assistant Dean of the Career Center, for those of you who haven't met me yet. So today's program is intended to provide you with information about creating a professional online presence. And we're going to include some tips and tricks, as well as potential pitfalls to avoid, and everything in between. So I encourage all of you to interrupt with questions. We want this to be interactive. If you would prefer to put your questions in the chat, I will monitor the chat and read them out as they come in. And for housekeeping purposes, our program today is being recorded for students who were not able to attend. Okay. All right. So I'm going to get us started here. And I've actually made a slideshow to keep me on track and to hopefully keep this a little lively and fun. So bear with me as I share that with all of you. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see that. Tom, can you give me a little nod if you can see my first slide? Okay, thanks. You're in my window. That's why I picked on you. Okay, so to start us off, I want to talk a little bit about how to use your social media profile as an employer magnet. And I think I should start by saying that most recruiters use LinkedIn these days in order to identify potential candidates. However, what's important for you all to remember as students about to enter the profession is that it's unlikely that recruiters are actively looking for your profiles. But what they are doing is they are watching your social media profiles after you apply for positions and as you're going through the process, right? So I'll just share with you that a 2014 survey found that 93% of job recruiters look at candidates' social media profiles when making a hiring decision. Now, I am willing to bet that today, as we sit here in 2021, that percentage is 100%, right? Additionally, the same survey found that 42% of those recruiters reconsidered their decision after viewing the content of a candidate's social media profiles. So then the question becomes, when an employer is looking at your profile, and this is across all different social media platforms, what are they asking themselves? What are they looking for? Here's some insightful information. They're looking to see whether you are sharing good information in the field in which you've expressed interest. They're looking to see if you have a sensible, professional-looking photo. They're looking to see if you're well connected within the field of your interest and your future professional field. And they're also looking to see if you're social and outgoing. In other words, they're trying to gauge from your social media profile whether or not you will be a good fit with the culture of their organization. So along those lines, do you demonstrate good judgment and appear to get along well with others? Or do you seem to be the sort of person who's argumentative or gossipy or belligerent. And of course, if you're using foul language, that's an immediate no-go, right? So they're also looking to see whether or not the skills and characteristics that you've expressed you have in your application materials are supported by what you're putting out into the world, right? So if you mention that your communication skills are top-notch, is this supported by your online interactions? What are you posting about? What are you tweeting about? Do the education experience and skills listed on your resume match up with your public profile? All right, so now I'm not sure if you can see this as well as I had hoped, but we're going to play a little game. This is my spin on People Magazine's Who Wore It Best, right? And here we're looking at two different LinkedIn profiles. And I'll just point out to you that I fully understand that Mark Cuban probably does not care what people think or potential employers think about his LinkedIn profile, right? He is sort of beyond that. But I thought this was a great example of what not to do. So I don't know if you can tell in the picture here, but Mark is holding a balloon. Looks like he's having some kind of celebration for himself, and he's smoking a cigar. So that is probably the best example that I could find of probably not the best representation that you want to make on your LinkedIn profile, right? The other part about Mark's profile that's worrying is that in the About section, he simply says, I'm an entrepreneur. Great, good for Mark, right? He has all the ability in the world to just put himself out like that. Or for anybody who's actively looking for a job, you need to be much more descriptive about what it is that you bring to the table and why an employer should be interested in what you have to offer. So let's compare Mark Cuban's I'm an entrepreneur to Alex Su on the other hand, right? So Alex Su is a leader in legal tech, and he is very active across all different social media platforms in a very engaging way. So you'll notice, or maybe I'll read it to you because I don't know how clear it is, but within Alex Su's About section, what he includes is, I'm a former lawyer who now works at the cutting edge of legal technology. Currently, I'm the Director of Business Development at Evisort, a Series A enterprise contracts technology company backed by Microsoft. I'm also the creator and host of Meeting of the Minds Live, a live webinar series discussing topics relating to contracts. Previously, I was an associate at Sullivan & Cromwell and clerk for a federal judge. I graduated from Northwestern Law, where I was an editor of the Law Review and the student commencement speaker. I'm also at Legal Tech Bro on TikTok, where I make silly videos poking fun at the legal industry, and they are actually kind of cute. So you'll notice what Alex is doing is he has created a theme across all of his social media platforms. Across every platform, he's indicating that he's a leader in legal technology, his background, his experience, and what he brings to the table. And there is absolutely 100% that any employer who's looking at Alex for a position in this field will clearly understand that he's passionate about it and sharing valuable information. Okay, so for you, in terms of tips for creating your strong professional brand across all social media platforms, here's what I think you should try to keep in mind. First, you want to be consistent across all of the social media platforms that you're using, right? You want to make sure that you're using the same themes and photos, and think of it in terms of branding. You're branding your experience and what you bring to the table. So keep your professional life separate from your personal one. And I'll just add a comment here. I know that many of us use Facebook for personal connections. I keep, because I'm very private, keep my Facebook connections only to family and friends. I use LinkedIn for all of my professional connections. I know that that's probably not true for many people, but I will say if you're using Facebook, consider creating a professional profile in addition to your personal one. So your professionals in your life are not seeing pictures of your children and your dogs and what you're eating for dinner. Make sure that, as Alex did in our example, you create a complete profile, including all relevant experience, and use a professional looking headshot. Keep the cigars and balloons out. Join career related groups and join relevant conversations. And here's what I want you to know about this. You have great content and valuable things to offer to these conversations because you're at the cutting edge of legal education. You, as law students, have a lot to offer that practitioners have frankly forgotten about because they learned it so long ago. So any kind of content where you're adding something valuable into the legal stratosphere is worth posting. So don't underestimate what you have to contribute. Highlight your skills to employers. Update your profile frequently, especially on LinkedIn. Like things, comment, share your successes. And again, know your worth. Know that what you put out into the world is valuable, even if it's something that you learned in class last week. Connect with the right people, curate your connections, right? Think about organizations that you can follow and think about leaders within industries that you can reshare and retweet or share on LinkedIn the work and contributions that they are making. And last but not least, and this is where I will turn things over to Professor Heverly, monitor and control your personal reputation. Do yourself a favor, Google yourself, set up a Google alert with your name on it, and think about how you are in every time you touch social media, creating and owning your brand. Okay, with that, I will stop my share and I will turn it over to Professor Heverly.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for stopping in today. Nice to see some faces that I might not have seen in a little while. I'm looking forward to one day seeing you actually in person, where we can actually see whole faces and not masked faces. So what I'm going to do is run through, some of you, depending on when you started here, may have seen an orientation presentation by me live in the new courtroom. There's a little bit of repetition here with that, but not really wholesale. Those of you who saw the recorded presentation got really a shortened view of something that we've done more broadly in the past. So we just wanted to sort of raise some of the points and questions and issues that arise in lawyers and law student use of the internet. So in terms of getting the lay of the land and thinking about the risks and rewards that you can find online, the place to start is the notion that the New York rules of professional conduct have a lot to say, not explicitly, but in their application about what lawyers do online and by extension to what law students do online, not necessarily because they directly apply to you. If you never get admitted to the practice of law, the rules of professional conduct don't apply except some very limited stuff about unauthorized practice, potentially. But they are the basis by which the legal profession gauges and reviews the conduct of the people who are its members. And so you want to join that club. And as a student, keeping those rules in mind is potentially important to you as you're going about it. So I'm not going to run through the rules. I'm not going to redo Professor Brush's or someone else's professional responsibility class. Just note that there are general kinds of rules about behavior online, especially in relation to advertising, communicating with clients and opposing counsel and judges that are in the rules. And those rules will apply whether you're sending a hard copy letter or whether you are sending an email or writing a comment on Facebook. So the general sort of rules about conduct are going to apply no matter how you do them. But there's also specific rules. And one of those, for example, requires competence in technology that you use or that is used in your practice. And so some lawyers, especially older lawyers, many times get this reputation. They don't want to be the one that's figuring out how the new app works and what they need to do with it. They're going to have somebody do that for them. And that's not really acceptable under the rules anymore. You don't necessarily need to be able to go in there and do it, but you need to understand how it works and how it's part of the practice. So if you're using a technology, whether it's WhatsApp or TikTok or some other technology that you youngins use, you need to understand how it works, not necessarily how the code is written or something, but what happens with it. What are your controls? What are the privacy controls? What kind of information is retained by the platform? What can other users see? All of those kinds of things, because they're relevant to the kind of information that you can pass across that. In addition, when thinking about what you're doing online, part of it is what Dean Fitzpatrick just talked about, which is the future employer expectations. Whether you're going to join a law firm or whether you're going to join a corporation or whether you're going to be a lawyer or whether you're going to be somebody who does investments or innovation, people who know that you are a trained lawyer are going to expect you to behave like a trained lawyer. And so future clients are going to have expectations. Future employers, lawyers and not, are going to have expectations. And so you ought to be thinking about those things when you're online. The days of sort of just being fun and laying back and having jokes at people's expense really are done based on your choice of the profession that you're going into. And I think the exchange is worth it, but it is one that you need to be aware of. So what is it about online stuff that causes so many difficulties and can be so sort of unnerving for people in the way in which they behave? Well, one is it's really pervasive. I mean, it's just everywhere. It's in our devices, it's on our computers. When you're in class, somebody next to you is looking at it. The news is reporting on it. We have all of these things going on that are related to reports on Facebook. And I'm going to refer to one today that was first on Facebook, and lots of the stuff that we've seen that we'll see was posted online. But in addition to the fact that it's so pervasive, the thing that you need to recognize is that regardless of the platform you're using and any promise they make you about how you control it and you can make it go away and you can delete it if you want to, anything you put online, very possibly anything you do at all these days, is easily copyable and redistributable. If you give me some sort of thing that I can somehow see, I can make a copy of it. And I'm not all that technologically advanced. I'm not a Luddite. I can get stuff to work. I am the person that people sometimes ask for help, but it very quickly gets to where I need somebody who's better than I am. So I'm sort of middle level of somebody who's technologically inclined. I can still do it because if I can see it with my eyes, there's going to be a way for me to record it, take a picture of it, audio record it. I might not be able to do it from the computer. I might have to hold my phone up, but that's easy these days because I always have my phone with me. In addition, and this is something that's going to be more important as we go forward, as we're interacting with stuff online, we need to recognize that all of the stuff that's in social media is what we call plastic. It's all very malleable. And so there's new technology out where you can animate real people to say things they never said. It's called deep fakes. But in addition to that, there's just Facebook. Photoshop. Photoshop has come to be known for faking photos, so much so that we talk about a photo that's been shopped. And so somebody that was holding a flower to give to her girlfriend suddenly is holding a gun and pointing that at her girlfriend because somebody's good enough with Photoshop to be able to erase the flower and put the gun in. And so we need to understand that sometimes when we see things that are outrageous, we should probably look for some backup before we react to them. And in addition, we should probably think long and hard before we engage in those technologies, even if we have the skills. So I'm a bad Photoshopper, but I could do a kind of passable job for a joke. It's not something I do often because it's usually not worth, unless the times that I do it, it's pretty clear that it's been photoshopped. So I have one of a friend of mine holding in his hand an alien from outer space. Okay, everybody probably knows that's a Photoshop, right? But anything that's not sort of that outlandish, I don't really do anymore because I don't think that it's an appropriate role for me to play. In addition, none of this is going to change. The genie's out of the bottle. Continually more genies are coming out. And we as lawyers need to be able to adjust to them and identify them and realize what they mean for our practice. In addition, it's not just what you choose to do online that's going to matter. So Dean Fitzpatrick talked about them searching through your social media, seeing how you're representing yourself, the kind of contributions you're making. That's all great. But other people are going to post stuff about you as well. And this is why the Google search by name isn't just like an ego trip. It's curating you online and looking for things. What kind of stuff can go online? Well, fake stuff, that's a separate issue. Come see me. Happy to talk with you about that if you have one of those issues. But stuff that you really did. So you're sitting in an online class and then you start putting some stuff up on your screen and somebody records that, or the class is being recorded. And in addition, stuff you do in real life, right? All can end up on social media. A couple of things to watch out for when you are, and some of these seem a little bit hard to get a handle on sometimes. When you're talking about things to say that you've learned or that you want to ruminate about or that you want to share with other people, you need to watch actual interactions with other people because you don't want to practice law before you're licensed to do so. So you don't want to give advice. It seems kind of easy online. Oh, did I violate this copyright when I did this? Oh, I took Heverly's copyright class. I know that that's fair use. So I'm going to say that's fair use. It seems easy, especially if you're on a forum where you're anonymous, something like Reddit. But it's not easy, and you can be found, as we'll talk about, and you might have practiced law without a license. Watch using, there's lots of technologies these days that can get around the will of other people. So people can put in their email a thing called a web bug. And this tells them whether you've opened the email, how long it was open for, whether you've opened it more than one time, the IP address of your computer, and therefore maybe a range of areas where you might be when you opened it. These kinds of things aren't ethical under the Code of Professional Conduct in New York. It's not something you should be doing because the technologies aren't clear. They're not open and they're not transparent. So they're sort of like spying almost on what somebody's doing. All of this means is that the branding thing that Dean Fitzpatrick talked about, you have to decide who you want to be. And you need to watch whether you're constantly looking at the rules to see whether you're crossing into some line or whether you just want to stay away from all of the lines. Because what kinds of stuff can happen and can end up online about you? So I'm going to hopefully make this work. Okay. So this was a lawyer in New York City in a deli.
The video of the rant went viral in a flash, and very soon the angry customer was identified as a 42-year-old New York lawyer whose office is located across the street from the restaurant. It turns out this incident is not the first time he's been caught on camera in an angry and unprovoked confrontation. His name is Aaron Schlossberg, and he's been videotaped in the past, turning his wrath on total strangers. Look what he found. Video posted on social media in 2016 of yet another bizarre run-in with Schlossberg.
I'm gonna call the police. You don't run into people. I'm a citizen here. You're not. You're an ugly foreigner. So I've never seen anyone act like this in real life.
So that guy's been publicly censured, by the appellate division, which has the disciplinary authority over him. But that's how he's remembered. You do a search for him, you find these videos of him being racist. And then of course you find the ones under that where his first statement is, I am not a racist. And then maybe when you go down a little bit, you find something he wants to be there. But other than that, it's all what other people have put up based on his interactions. And all of the things were sort of like, they're what we call in soccer own goals, where you kick the ball in your own goal, right? They were totally unforced errors on his part in being a jerk, doing that in public and not realizing the implications of that. And so as we can come up with more examples here. Sorry, just always have too many Zoom windows to choose from. Another time that happened was a lawyer who was an assistant DA in Texas who abused an Uber driver. She appeared, for at least from what I could tell, to have been drunk, but was really threatening and other things. And he audio recorded it, and she lost her position at the district attorney's office. So these kinds of things do happen. Can they happen to law students? Sure. There was a law student who was kicked out of his school, and the expulsion was upheld by the courts. He took a picture of the school's founder that looked like the school's founder was giving the middle finger, when actually what had happened was the school's founder had just been scratching. And just, you know, if you go frame by frame through a video, you can find all sorts of weird things. He posted that to Facebook. And then that escalated into a lot of other things that occurred. There was probably some more stuff going on there, but it was initially the Facebook posting that got him in trouble. And his dean asked him to write a brief supporting his right to post it. And he did a brief on freedom of speech, but it was a private law school where the First Amendment doesn't apply. It did not go over too well. We have other examples where lawyers have gotten themselves in trouble. The entire US Attorney's Office in New Orleans was caught up in a scandal where someone, a builder that they were investigating, a builder/developer they were investigating, anytime there was a news story about him, there were all these anonymous comments after the news story talking about how he was under investigation, some of which really seemed to know the details. And so it eventually turned out that a number of assistant US attorneys were posting in the newspaper anonymously with details of their investigations in order to hurt his reputation. They lost their positions. They were either demoted or fired. One was disbarred not too long ago. And the US attorney for the district that covers New Orleans stepped down over the scandal, all because they wanted to go online and I don't know, like get some justice or something. I'm not sure what the feelings were that they were having at that point. They wanted to hurt somebody they thought was a bad criminal person. It's unclear to me what was motivating them, but they didn't think it through, okay? Another Florida lawyer was not only disbarred, but was arrested for online posts about a judge. I mean, we have some things that seem a little bit sillier. Maybe you're thinking, I would never do these sorts of crazy kinds of things. But you might end up doing something that's a little bit sillier. So let's look at this. So can everybody see that picture? It's a good picture, right? That was a judge in Michigan. He sent that picture to his female married bailiff. And then to sort of add to it, when the local newspaper called because she released the picture, because why? Because she could, she had the physical picture, it was easy to redistribute. He said, yeah, that's me, ain't no shame in my game. No longer a judge, so ain't no judge in his game either. And then we have an additional example as well. I'll come back to that in a minute. No, this is not, oh, right, I have to unshare from over here. One window, then the other window. And so we've got additional examples, other things we can think about that I want you to think about, like, how does that happen? We just thought it was a good idea, right? To send that out. There was a judge who was a district court judge. He was the chief judge of the district, sent out a racist joke about President Obama while President Obama was president, not that that really matters. And he sent it from his official judge email. And of course, he eventually resigned based on that. We can get into other things. You can feel like I should be able to do some of these things, right? I should be able to express myself. You can get in the free speech mode. That's one of those things that's easy to get caught up in, like that student at Regent University Law School who said, I have free speech to post a picture that was a real picture of the founder, even though it's not a picture that really reflected reality. I didn't alter it any, I should be able to post it. A lawyer in Florida came back from a really problematic, he was a criminal defense attorney, came back from a problematic some interactions with a judge who were really unhappy. The entire criminal bar in the area was unhappy with the judge. So he came back and on a blog posted that she was an evil, unfair witch. And he was censured for that. And he appealed it to the Florida Supreme Court, arguing, of course, free speech, I should be able to say these things. And the court rejected that argument, which is a pretty consistent theme across these types of things. Now, it's also interesting that part of what they were frustrated or mad at the judge about was that the judge was insisting that their clients waive their right to a speedy trial through some procedural things. So the judge came and changed the way some of the court procedure worked so that they either had to be ready for trial very, very quickly, which is unreasonable for a defendant because they don't have the evidence yet, or they had to waive their right to a speedy trial. And she continued to do this for quite some time. That judge was eventually removed from the bench. So the complaint was probably right, but the way it was made was wrong because it was made in passion or out of passion. What's another thing to sort of pay attention to and watch out for? Well, there was a judge in Texas, and one of the attorneys who regularly appeared before her had friended her on Facebook. When you're a judge and an attorney, there are things to look at there that aren't really relevant to you guys yet. And the bar associations and the disciplinary authorities are still looking at those because you don't want to have an impression with the public that you have an in with the judge. This was fairly early on in Facebook. They had a Facebook friendship. The attorney had a death in the family, let the judge know, said, I need a continuance, went away to the funeral, attended the funeral and posted about it on Facebook. But then for about the next 5 days went partying, posting about all the partying online. And when she returned the following Monday to court, asked for another continuance, having forgotten that the judge could see everything that she did on Facebook. And she wasn't granted the continuance, obviously, because of that. So let me give you some hard and fast rules and some suggestions for what you can do in relation to social media, being online. So obviously don't, in public, I guess in general, but also on social media, don't be a jerk. Don't call other people names, even on private lists, even if you're on that group me that is popular with many of the students. All of that stuff can be captured and shown to somebody else and has been. So you're always, always, always a professional, and you need to remember that. So flaming, trolling, insulting, being racist or otherwise inappropriate. I'm not so big on the particular language, so I'm not easily offended by people's choice of words, whether they're curse words or not curse words, but you need to know that we're in an industry, in a profession that is worried about those kinds of things, and you need to make your choices appropriately for who you want to be. Even in things that you think are private, even in just back and forth messages on Facebook or Instagram, where you're doing private messaging, those can all be released. You might think they won't be, but they might. So some other things. If you're in the clinic where you're doing actual legal work, don't post about your clients. Not even anonymously, don't even anonymize them. So I was working with my client today who's in jail. No. That's not the thing to do. If you have any questions at all about that, talk to your faculty member in the clinic. Say, I'd really like the public to know how this is going. I think the public should know it. Work on it with them as part of the process of being in the clinic. Don't just simply go on and post. There's a public defender in Florida who posted a picture. So sometimes clients, when they come from jail, their family will bring them clothes. So they brought this male defendant clothes, and in with the clothes were leopard striped underwear. So she took a picture of him and posted them to Facebook. I guess to get clicks and likes because it was seen as funny, but it was not at all appropriate. You can disclose confidences from your clients that way in violation of the rules, those rules of professional conduct are going to apply to those kinds of situations where you're representing a client. So before you do any posting about real clients, even if you're doing pro bono work, check with the supervisor before you go to post about it online in anything that could be considered confidential. And even if you think it's not, you think it's clear it's not, still talk with them about it. That's useful. Don't use social media to attack or disparage others. And that's especially true if you're talking about people in our profession. Opposing parties, counsel, judges, but even members of the public. That's not the kind of thing that's going to go over well. And the rules have a particular provision that looks at whether or not your conduct somehow reflects negatively on your ability to practice law. That's what that New York City lawyer who was racist in the restaurant was censured under. It reflected on his ability to practice law, that he did that, even though it was completely unrelated to any legal practice issue at that time. In addition, just as you think about this, being too zealous, being too passionate on social media can negatively affect you. Advocating for a client, for example, you might be tempted to sort of push the edge a little bit. You might be tempted to unleash the Kraken in some way versus via social media. Those are things to avoid. The past few months were a whole litany of things to avoid legally, but in social media, going too hard after people can really negatively affect your client and yourself. So how do you avoid that? What if you're just a really passionate person? I get really passionate about some stuff. I get really mad when I'm copied, for example, on a message to a bunch of people and somebody's being really rude. Certainly if they're being racist or if they're being sexist, I don't have any tolerance for it. I really don't. So how do I deal with that kind of situation? Well, if I'm really mad, I open Word and I write a response to an email, say, that I got. And then I leave it sit there. And the next day I look at it and I see if the words that I wrote are words that I really want to own, or whether I can put it in a way that's just as effective, but maybe not as caught up in the passion, in a way that reflects better on me. There was an example of a lawyer from, I want to say Louisiana, and he was in a fight with another lawyer who was calling him names in all of the emails. And his responses tended to be, I'm not quite sure why you're so angry, but it looks like we're close to working this out. And he probably had a lot more patience than I did. I probably would have told the person that he needed to behave more professionally, but it was a really great response because it ended up in court. And now you have completely unreasonable lawyer thinking he's snarky and funny and smart and witty. And then you have professional lawyer just going, okay, I don't know what you're doing over there, but do we have some sort of agreement? Because it looks like we do. Don't try to be the quick response person. There's something to be said in the sort of adrenaline rush from being the first person to call somebody else out. Well, look what they wrote. I'm going to be the first person to say, that's the stupidest thing you've ever done, and I can't believe you did it. Why do I say don't be the first person? Because what's posted might not reflect what actually happened. So you might be wrong, and you might look worse than they did. And then second, you might just not think it through enough. You might just put it in words that later, I really wish I hadn't put it in those words. The next piece of advice that I would have, in addition to sort of slowing down your social media use, is not to use anonymity or pseudonymity. Don't use fake names and other things to try to do things that you don't want yourself to own. I have no problem posting under a different name. I have different names on forums that I'm on for photography, for drones. Nobody in those forums uses their own name. So it would have been really weird for me to come out as Professor Robert A. Heverly. But I don't use those to hide who I am. And people can easily find me from things that I've posted there. If I was trying to be anonymous, I would need to acknowledge that anonymity doesn't really exist. I know people who can probably find out who you are unless you're really good every single time that you're anonymous. One time you slip and don't do one of the steps that you need to do to be anonymous on the internet, and you can be found. And that means that even though anonymity is constitutionally protected, you have a right to be anonymous on the internet. It's very thin, because that protects you from the government finding out who you are or a court ordering it, but it doesn't stop somebody from using their own technology and their own know-how. Part of where, for my last example about controlling those risks, will come from an example of a forum called Auto Admit that was focused on law schools. And the law school students were doing things like rating women in the schools. And it was all with just pseudonyms. They all just had whatever names that they had adopted. Well, some of the people who were targeted on those lists, and then so they complained about was on the list, and then they were personally targeted with all sorts of abuse, some of which was really, really bad, all while these people thought they were anonymous. She found out who they were, sued, got a court order, and started finding out who they were, and they all scattered. They all started seeing some of the emails. If you look up the Auto Admit Yale scandal, you'll see some of the emails they sent begging the attorneys not to identify them and how it would ruin their life in the future. That's not what anonymity is about. Anonymity is about like complaining about the government and complaining about power so that you're not immediately subject to the ramifications of that. It's not to attack people. It's not to be mean to people. So my advice is be aware that you're a professional. Always keep that professional hat on when you're acting, and then curate, following Dean Fitzpatrick's advice to you, who you are online, and be that person. Don't just make it an online thing, make it who you really are. So when somebody meets you, they're like, yeah, that's just like you appeared online. And you're a really reasonable professional person. So that's all I have for today. And I guess we'll take questions after Tom talks to us a little bit, right?
Thank you very much, Professor Heverly. Tom?
Thank you. I don't have a lot to add to what Dean Fitzpatrick and Professor Heverly said. They really were very thorough, and certainly a lot of cautionary tales there. I would say just a couple of quick things. One is that, as we said, doing an audit of your social media is important. I would ask for help with all these things. It's great to Google yourself, but have somebody else do it as well. Have some other people, particularly somebody professional possibly, have them go through a process where they're looking at your social media, what they would find out about you if they were doing a search sort of as an employer. If you're going to build your LinkedIn profile, and I think that's critical at this time, ask for help with that as well. I just, while I was searching for this job that I just started a couple of weeks ago, I worked with a professional to help me build my LinkedIn profile. Even though I had had one for a long time as a professional, it was really helpful to have somebody with an outside perspective say, this is what I see as positive, this is where you can do better, here's some tips, some ideas. So lean on people who have professional experience. Don't try to do all this yourself. The other thing I'd want to say too is social media is a great tool if you're again preparing to go out on the job market. It's a great tool. This is the time to really up your social listening game. And I know we touched on some of this before, but really tuning into those areas that you're most interested in, those fields you want to work in. So absolutely follow the companies that you think are the biggest and best known in those areas, or companies or firms that you're interested in working in. But also look to the media side of things too. Who are the reporters who write about those areas? Who are out there every day, breaking the news or doing the deep dives, and really follow them and do that social listening. I can tell you, as somebody who's done a lot of hiring in my career, nothing impresses me more than when I sit down across from a candidate who clearly knows what's going on in the field they want to work in. When somebody sits down in front of me and says, oh, I noticed this issue is going on in higher education. How is your college or school handling that? Ask me that kind of informed question. It really is, to me, very impressive, and really says a lot about this person's seriousness about being a professional in that area. So take the time to really build your social listening tools. Go onto Twitter and follow all those reporters, all those lead thinkers and business people in those areas. Same thing on LinkedIn as well. Build all those contacts. Feel free to reach out and connect with people too. People are very willing to connect with you on LinkedIn. Organizations are happy to have you connect with them on LinkedIn. And join in the conversation in a thoughtful way. If you have something to say, or even if it's just an agreement with something that one of those people posts, and you say, this is really important. I hadn't realized this. Thank you for sharing that. That I think is really important. And then share it with your own networks as well. So I would say, cautionary tales are really important. Building that that brand is really important, but it's all social media can be a very positive tool for you also as you start to prepare yourself to go out there and find your next step in your career, and use those social media tools to be informed, and to really prepare yourself as you start to put yourself out there. And that's really, I think, all I have to add.
Thank you very much for that, Tom. Does anybody have any questions about anything that we have covered today? No, I will say I'll share one small, oh, Michelle, were you going to say something?
I have a question. I guess if you've done something or something has happened and, you know, it blows up, because I'm thinking of the I am not a cat lawyer from last week on Zoom. So, you know, something like that happens, then how does a person kind of recover, I guess, from that?
So if I was going to use that, but it came to be so prevalent that I just decided everybody would have already seen it. It's actually a really good, so I'll start with just that piece, because that was a perfect example of many things done right. First, the lawyer who was the cat didn't freak out, right? I'm ready to proceed, Judge. I don't know what's going on here. I can't fix it, but I'm ready to proceed. The judge, nobody made fun of him. You could see the other two lawyers sometimes are smiling a little, but even they maintained their professionalism. And then after, the judge posted it not to make fun and said specifically, don't make fun, but this is the danger of the world we're in. And when they talked to the lawyer, what was his response? You know, if people got a little humor out of it and a little of enjoyment, then my day's made. That's good with me. So nobody took themselves too seriously and nobody got really worked up about it. In terms of what blows up, I guess it depends what blows up. You know, if it's something fun like that, then just try to stay a little bit humble and a little bit laid back about it. And that's probably the best thing you can do. And then you can be the lawyer cat, you know, oh, remember that, that was me, it was kind of funny. And you can kind of keep that and trade on that a little bit in ways that are good and useful. If it's, you know, if you're Schlossberg in New York City, where you're cursing out people because they're speaking Spanish, and where you're caught on the street doing other stuff, I mean, that's really like, it's time to figure out who you are and who you want to be. And if you really want to make changes, then make those changes and then get a professional to help people see that you really changed. I don't see anything that indicates change there, and anything that I've seen from that particular lawyer or from some of the other ones who are more along the lines of, I'm really annoyed that I got caught. Right? It's like the little kid. I'm not really sorry, not sorry that I took the candy. I'm just really sorry that you caught me. So if you do something wrong and you can truly apologize for it, that's the thing to do. Combine it with action to show that you're serious about what happened. You know, everybody has a bad day. I have bad days. I didn't follow my own rule at one point, and something in the news got me really upset. And I went online and saw the tweet for myself and wrote a response, and didn't mean to hit send and did. And it was probably out there for 30 seconds or something, but I was mortified because it's not something that I really wanted to go out there. If it had been picked up, if everybody said, oh my God, Professor Heavily said this thing online, I would have explained, I would have apologized and talked about what I would do differently so that it didn't happen again.
Yeah, I would add to that. What you're saying is exactly right. That what you need to do is, it doesn't have to be something major. You don't have to make a huge mistake, but sometimes you get called out. Sometimes you use a term that someone says, you know, that term that you used was insensitive, and here's why. First reaction shouldn't be to be defensive, to try to defend why you did it. Listening again is important. Listen to that person. Try to have a dialogue. Admit if you feel you've made a mistake. Talk about learning from that. I think what happens is we get defensive. We dig ourselves deeper into a hole, and what starts off as a minor thing that can be cut off at that point, where it's simply, oh, thank you for pointing that out. I'm sorry. You're right. I shouldn't have said that. It goes away versus somebody who continues to try to either ignore the criticism or defend and push back, where then it begins to snowball from there. So getting onto it early, acknowledging that you've made a mistake, being willing to take responsibility, I think is huge.
And I'll just add one thing to those pieces of advice, and that is, I think sometimes if there's something put out into the world that isn't necessarily horrible, maybe it wasn't something that you necessarily posted. Nevertheless, when you search your name, this thing you're connected to comes up. It can be beneficial to make a real conscious effort to create good, positive content. And that pushes down those search results of the thing that isn't great. So again, contributing in a meaningful way within the profession, and really curating who you want to be moving forward can be helpful in terms of mitigating anything negative out there.
Yeah, I had a question for Tom. I know you mentioned that you consulted a professional about upgrading your LinkedIn. I was just wondering, do you have any suggestions for like a law student if they wanted to consult with somebody in terms of their LinkedIn and upgrading their profile?
That's a good question. Maybe Mary, do we have resources here for somebody to who could help with that? I work with somebody who's a placement person who's helping me, just throughout the job search and who does that professionally. But Mary, maybe do we have some in-house resources that can help?
So absolutely. So I often provide advice to students on the particulars of their LinkedIn accounts. And also we had a speaker come at the beginning of last summer, and we have a video archive of that program. And he did a great job sort of explaining not just how things should look on LinkedIn, but more into sort of the algorithms that really make it work and things you can do on LinkedIn to get yourself promoted. So Akon, did I say your name correctly? Okay, good. So I can send you that video if you're interested.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Parting words of wisdom? I will share one last thing, which is what I tell my daughter very often, so often that I'm pretty sure she now tunes me out. But what I say to her is this: anything you put in the world, you should assume that it could land up on a billboard. And if you're not comfortable with having that on a billboard, and I usually use like on the side of BQE or the FDR as my example, then you better not send it. Think twice. So I'll leave you with that. And if anybody has a request for sort of feedback on LinkedIn profile or otherwise, I'd be happy to help you with that. Thank you all for coming. And thank you to Professor Heverly and Tom for joining us.
My pleasure.
You're welcome. Thank you.